Moving on, we're still going to be simplifying radicals, but now we're going to start looking at things other than square roots and other than just multiplication. So, for example, letter I, we now have the square root of 15 divided by 64. Now, one thing we need to know when we're dealing with division is another thing I can do here is I can rewrite this as the square root of 15 over the square root of 64. So you can either write it as the square root of the entire fraction, or you can break it up so that you have the square root of the numerator over the square root of the denominator. Now, once I do that, I'm looking at the square root of 64, and the square root of 64 is 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. The square root of 15 I don't think comes out so nicely, but we could try to simplify it. So if I do 15, that would be 5 times 3. Nothing there has a partner, so I can't simplify anymore. And this is your final answer. Now, one of the things we need to know about simplifying with radicals is when you're simplifying with radicals, you should never have a square root in the denominator, or you should never have a root of any sort in the denominator. For our purposes this year, I'm not going to give you a whole lot like that, but it might just be something to keep in mind for the future. Next one. Letter D, square root of 81 over x squared. So again, I'm first going to look at this as the square root of 81 over the square root of x squared. Well, the square root of 81 is 9. 9 times 9 is 81. The square root of x squared is x. X times x is x squared. All done. Letter J, cube root of negative 128. Now, once again, we're dealing with a cube root. So the difference here is we have to find 3 identical things to multiply to negative 128. Now, the other thing that I'm going to keep in mind here is this negative. And in order to kind of make this a little simpler, I'm going to rewrite first as the cube root of negative 1 times 128. And I'm going to consider these differently. So the first thing I'm looking at is the cube root of negative 1, which I'm going to rewrite as negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. Positive 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. So here I've got 3 things that multiply to negative 1. Then I'm going to go over and I'm going to consider 128. And in order to break down 128, we're just going to start dividing. So 128, I'm going to go divided by 2 is 64. 64 is 8 times 8. 8 is 2 times 4, which I'm going to do on the other one as well. 4 is 2 times 2. And 4 is 2 times 2. Now, that's a whole lot going on. So we can't use the 4, we can't use the 8, we can't use the 8, we can't use the 64, we can't use the 4, we can only use the prime numbers. Now, the key here is that this is a cube root. So in order to get out of prison this time, you need a group of 3. So if I'm first considering this negative 1, which I broke apart because I didn't want this to get confused with negatives, this guy gets out. These 2 don't make it. So we now have a negative 1 on the outside, and the other 2 don't make it out of prison. So then if I'm going to go consider my groups over here, I need a group of 3. So a group of 3 would be right there. This guy makes it. These 2 do not. So I'm going to bring another 2 out. Then I need another group of 3. This guy makes it. These 2 do not. And then this guy doesn't have anybody to try to get out of prison with, so he's going to go back inside. Now, another thing is, yes, he goes back inside prison, but remember, this was a cube root prison, so don't forget your cube root. That's probably the biggest mistake I see, and I actually do it all the time. So if you catch me doing it, yell at me. Okay, -1 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times -1 is -4, and then we've got the cube root of 2, and we're simplified. Letter E, cube root of 125 x to the 7th. So again, cube root. I'm going to start with 125. 5 times 25. 25. 5 times 5. And then x to the 7th. Again, you can list out 7 x's, or you can think and go, okay, I have 7 x's. How many groups of 3 can I get out of 7? Well, I can get two groups of 3. So really that would be like a x squared with 1 left over. That's how you would do it mentally. But if you're not okay with mentally, I'm going to list it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 x's. Okay, we're doing groups of 3. 1, 2, 3. 5 gets out. Nobody's left because you can't use this, so we've just got 5. Now, x to the 7th, group of 3. 1, 2, 3. 1 gets out, so now I have an x out. Another group of 3. 1, 2, 3. So now I have another x out. This guy, back inside the prison. Ultimately, if we put it all together, 5x squared times the cube root of x, because don't forget, your prison up there was a cube root. Letter K, cube root of y divided by 216. So same thing as before, we can break this into the cube root of y divided by the cube root of 216. I'm looking at 216 and I'm going to start 7 times 7 times 7. Nope. 6 times 6 times 6. Yep. So 216, actually, if you grab your phone and do 6 times 6 times 6, will get you exactly 216. So I know the cube root of 216 is 6. The cube root of y, there's only one y, and you need a group of 3, so nothing's going to happen there. And you're done. Letter F, cube root of 8x to the 4th over 27y cubed. So once again, I'm going to break these apart and consider them separately. So the cube root, 8x to the 4th over the cube root of 27y cubed. Starting in the denominator, 27, 9 times 3, 3 times 3, and then y times y times y. We're dealing with a cube root, so we need groups of 3. There's a group of 3. And in fact, the cube root of 27 is just 3. The cube root of y cubed is just y. So our denominator is 3y. The cube root is gone because everybody got out of jail. Remember, you can't use this 9 because you broke it down into 3's. In the numerator, x to the 4th would be 1, 2, 3, 4. 8 would be 2 times 4 and 2 times 2. So groups of 3, 1, 2, 3. So 2 get out of prison. The other 2 don't make it. And then for my x's, there's a group of 3. So x gets out, and then this guy goes back in. And don't forget that this was a cube root. So cube root, final answer, 2x times the cube root of x divided by 3y.